please people than say no. It's a chronic compulsion of saying yes, even to the good things. And you know you are the yes woman when you don't have a lot of joy in your yeses, right? Your yeses flood your body with complete anxiety. And then you're stressed out, you're in over your head, you're completely just freaking out about what are you gonna do, and then all of a sudden your husband's just like, how was your day, honey? And you're like, "Rah, rah, rah," you know, because you have no joy and peace in your life. You're saying, yeah, do I have somebody that can relate back there? Excellent, I love examples. So, all right, so let me give you a few examples so we can relate to this woman. Examples, yes, I'll do the PTA meeting and hand make all the sweaters for my kids' chess club even though I don't sew. Or yes, I'll lead this Bible study even though my home life is in more need of ministry than the women's ministry is. Or yes, sure, I'll start a new business with you even though you are doing it just because you don't want to let someone down. Not because that's really what God has called you to do. Or yes, girl, I'll buy your Girl Scout cookies and your cheerleading bows. Even though money is a tight source of tension in your marriage and in your home, you have said yes anyway. Can anybody else relate to this besides me? So I want to talk about the heart of the issue of saying yes. This is going to sound a little bit different than maybe what you've heard before, but God's just kind of been like with me about this. I'm like, okay, Lord, I got it. So at the heart of the issue of saying yes for most of us is ego. Now follow me here. It sounds a little different because the definition of the word ego, a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. So synonyms of self-esteem and self-importance are self-image, self-respect, and self-confidence. So ego is anything that serves yourself. So when we say yes, and it really serves us, rather than being an overflow of our relationship with Christ, we are serving ourselves, thus we're really serving ego. And most of the time, we think of ego as like the gym guy, like I'm gonna pump you up, type of a guy, right? Like that's who I think of. But it really can be, it's most often whenever we are just serving ourselves, we are serving ego. So here's a few examples. Go with me here. If you're afraid to say no because you're really not wanting people to think poorly of you, it's serving ego. Anybody else done that? I have. I want people to like me. I'm awesome. You know what I mean? And so, but it's really serving ego. For example, I lived in Colorado for just a little bit. My husband and I, when we first had Josiah, and he was born with a lot of medical issues, and he was on oxygen till he was almost a year old. So we would take him to the nursery at church, right? Raise your hand if you've ever served in the nursery at church. Bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. Okay, you guys are angels. So one day I went to drop Josiah off. I was dragging the oxygen tank. I'm like so tired. Like I have nothing left in my life at this point. Like when I say nothing left, I mean I have nothing left in my energy tank, right? There was just nothing, and you've all been there, right? Where you know that you have nothing left to give. Like the fact that you showed up with church and your right foot is on your right shoe and your left shoe, that's a miracle. As I showed up and the church attendant came up to me and said, "Hey, Lauren, I just want to know, would you like to serve in the nursery and be the hands and the feet of Jesus?" And I was like, ugh. And I was like, yes, I would love to serve, And my mouth said, sure, absolutely. But in my brain and in my heart, I was just like, I can't take anything else right now. I am drowning. I'm completely drowning in my life. I can't say yes to anything else. And yet I did it. And why did I do it? Because I wanted her to think well of me, right? I wanted to please her more than I wanted to do what I needed to do right in that moment. And in that moment, I just needed to serve my little baby boy, and I needed there to be peace in my home. So I said yes, because I didn't want her to think bad of me. I wanted her to think that I was the hands and the feet of Jesus and that I had a servant's heart. And yet that was really serving ego. Does that make sense? We dive in with that? Okay, so having a servant's heart should come out of an overflow of our relationship with God, not out of pleasing other people. Having a servant's heart should come out of an overflow of our relationship with God, not out of pleasing other people. So volunteering in the nursery, it's a really good thing. It's a really good thing. But just because it's a good thing in your life doesn't mean it's God's thing for your life, right? So that is super important for us to remember. Example, you easily hand out yeses because we're looking for something that makes us feel valued or important. And when we say yes to everything, we are often trying to fill up a void in our hearts. We do that as women a lot. We may have a void over here, so I'll say yes to this over here because it's going to make me feel better, right? That's really not out of an abundance of our relationship with Christ. It's out of making ourselves feel better. It's just serving ourselves. So to recap to this point, the yes woman has no room to breathe in her life. So she says yes to so many things, so many times that she's not even called to, and thus she has completely choked out joy in her life. Said yes to so many things that she has choked out joy in her life. So that brings us to this point. Well, okay, how do I know if I should say yes or if I should say no to something, right? So how do I know? What does that really look like? Well, if we're remaining in Him, that yes or that no, it really is. It's going to always be readily available to us. And often we know the right answer, right? You know whether it's right for you at that moment, but sometimes we don't listen to it because we'd really rather feel better about ourselves in that instant. So we pray and we wait. So when you're wondering about saying yes or no, we continue to remain in the vine and pray and wait. So as we get busy, right, when we get really busy, we may not choose to spend that much time with God, and so we're cutting ourselves off from the vine, right? So if we cut ourselves off from the vine, that yes or no is going to sound a little more like this, a little more like this, a little more like this, right? It's going to be a little harder to hear than when you're over here by the vine and you can hear, yes, you should absolutely do that, and I bless you. We're over here, you can't hear it quite as well. When we cut ourselves off from the vine, it is much harder to hear God's yeses and God's nos for our life. So remaining in the vine means that we can hear the yeses and the nos, and thus that is a really big portion of having complete joy in our life. Galatians 1:10, Paul writes, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." Ooh. Anybody else struggle with pleasing other people instead of Christ? I do. Yes. Way to put it out there. So this is what I challenge you to do. I want you to measure up your yeses with all three of these things. So if you're like, okay, I'm not really sure if I should say yes or no, you're praying on something, stay close to the vine and measure your yeses with this. Does this glorify God? Does this bring you joy? And does this nourish others? And that's how you're going to know if it's fruit, because that is what fruit does. It glorifies God. The fruit in our life glorifies God. The fruit in our life brings us joy. And the fruit in our life nourishes others. It multiplies, right? So I challenge you to measure your yeses when you're really wrestling with that, staying close to the vine and walking through that. Do your yeses measure up with those things? So here what we're going to do, I want you to take a few minutes. This is kind of an interactive session. Take a few minutes and I want you to write down the answer to this question. And it is okay if you don't know. If you don't know the answer, sit there and just pray about it. Sit there and pray about it. What I'm currently saying yes to that is distracting me from joy is blank. What I'm currently saying yes to that is distracting me from joy is blank.